You and your boyfriend have been together for around 2.5 to 3 years. When a relationship lasts that long, it often means that the couple has built a strong emotional connection, created memories together, and made plans for the future. At this stage, most people assume they truly know their partner and trust them completely. You probably felt the same way about your boyfriend. You saw him as someone you loved, someone you could rely on, and someone who cared for you just as much as you cared for him. Throughout those years, you likely went through both happy and challenging moments, as every relationship does. There were probably times when you felt deeply connected to him, when you shared your secrets, dreams, and vulnerabilities. You might have had inside jokes, favorite places to go together, and late-night conversations that made you feel safe and understood. Love is often built on these small moments of closeness, and it's what makes the betrayal that follows even more painful. Trust is the foundation of any strong relationship, and you likely trusted him completely. You might have never doubted his faithfulness, nor did you ever feel the need to check his phone or question his actions. After spending years together, you had no reason to believe that he would ever betray you. But then, everything changed in a single moment when you saw something you were never supposed to see. That moment shattered the illusion of trust you had in him. It made you question everything. Had he always been this way? Had he been lying to you for a long time? Was everything you had together just an illusion? The pain of betrayal doesn't come just from the act itself, it comes from the realization that the person you loved and trusted was capable of hurting you in such a deep and cruel way. The fact that you found out the truth not from him, but by accident makes the situation even worse. If he had come forward and confessed, admitting his mistake and asking for forgiveness, things might have been different. You might have at least respected his honesty. But instead, the truth came out in a way that he didn't expect, and his reaction to being caught only made things more painful. At this point, everything changed. Your once secure and happy relationship now felt uncertain. The foundation of trust that took years to build was completely broken in a matter of seconds. You were left feeling betrayed, confused, and heartbroken. You didn't know what to believe anymore, and you were forced to make a decision. Could you ever trust him again? Your story isn't just about infidelity, it's about how betrayal affects a person's emotional and mental well-being. You were deeply hurt not just because he cheated, but because he kept it a secret and didn't take responsibility. When trust is broken, it doesn't just disappear, it lingers in the mind, making you question everything. The pain doesn't just go away overnight, and it's not something that can be fixed with just words or temporary actions. This was the moment when your relationship took a turn for the worse. What came next would only make things more complicated, leaving you struggling to understand whether you should stay or walk away. The moment you found out your boyfriend cheated on you was not through an honest confession, nor was it a misunderstanding that could be explained away. Instead, you found out in one of the most painful ways possible, by accidentally seeing his phone screen when it was open. You didn't even go through his messages or actively search for evidence. The truth was simply right there in front of you, undeniable and devastating. The message exchange between him and another girl confirmed that something had happened. She had sent him a message saying, "I was so happy to see you," which immediately suggested that they had met recently. But what made it worse was his response, "I want to see you again." These weren't just casual texts between friends or harmless interactions. They clearly indicated that he had met up with this girl before, and he was making plans to meet her again. In that moment, your mind must have been racing. You likely felt a mix of emotions: shock, anger, confusion, and heartbreak. Everything you had believed about your relationship was suddenly put into question. You had trusted him, loved him, and given him your time and energy, only to find out that he had been lying and sneaking around behind your back. Another layer of pain came from the timing of his betrayal. Based on what you saw, this encounter with the other girl happened before you and he had sex. That realization made everything feel even more disgusting and heartbreaking. It wasn't just emotional cheating, it was likely physical too. The thought that he had been intimate with someone else before being with you must have made you feel sick, used, and disrespected. Your reaction was natural. The rage and betrayal were too much to process all at once. Without thinking, you threw the phone at him and demanded answers. You asked him directly, "Who is this?" hoping, maybe even foolishly, that he would come clean and admit the truth. But instead of being honest, he did what many cheaters do: he denied everything. His immediate response wasn't an apology or an attempt to explain. Instead, he brushed it off, saying it was "no one," and telling you that you were just overthinking it. This response must have made you even more furious. Not only did he betray you, but now he was trying to gaslight you, making you feel like you were crazy for questioning him. This is a common tactic used by people who get caught. They try to make their partner doubt their own instincts and reality so they can avoid taking responsibility for their actions. But you weren't overthinking it. The messages were clear as day, and there was no reasonable explanation that could erase what you had just seen. The problem was, he wasn't willing to acknowledge the truth. Instead of showing remorse, he was more concerned with covering up his actions and making you feel like the problem. At this point, you were likely faced with an impossible decision. Should you push harder for the truth, knowing that he would probably continue lying? Should you leave immediately, despite the years you had invested in this relationship? Should you try to believe his words, even though your gut told you otherwise? The painful reality of infidelity is that it doesn't just hurt because someone cheated, it hurts because it breaks the trust, the love, and the safety that the relationship once had. It leaves you feeling confused, insecure, and deeply wounded. Even if you choose to stay, things can never go back to the way they were before. In that single moment, your relationship changed forever. The man you loved was no longer who you thought he was. And now, whether you wanted to or not, you had to figure out what to do next. After seeing those messages, your emotions must have been overwhelming. It's one thing to suspect that your partner might be unfaithful, but it's another to see the proof right in front of you. The words, "I want to see you again," weren't just friendly or meaningless. They carried weight, they showed intent, excitement, and desire. They revealed that your boyfriend had stepped outside of your relationship, emotionally and likely physically. With your heart pounding, you didn't hesitate, you threw his phone at him and demanded an explanation. That's the natural response when someone you love and trust betrays you in such a cruel way. You weren't asking for much. All you wanted was the truth, some kind of acknowledgement, maybe even an apology. But instead of owning up to his actions, your boyfriend did what so many cheaters do: he denied, minimized, and tried to flip the script. Denial as his first defense. His first reaction wasn't guilt, remorse, or even panic. Instead, he said, "It's no one. You're overthinking it." This statement is classic gaslighting. Instead of addressing the fact that you had caught him in a compromising situation, he tried to make you doubt yourself. He didn't offer a real explanation. He didn't comfort you. He didn't even show regret. He just tried to make you feel crazy for being upset in the first place. This tactic is common among people who get caught doing something wrong. Instead of admitting their mistake, they try to make the person who caught them feel guilty for even asking questions. It's an attempt to control the narrative by making you feel like you're the irrational one. If he could successfully convince you that you were overreacting, he wouldn't have to deal with the consequences of his actions. But deep down, you knew better. You knew what you saw. You knew those texts weren't meaningless. You knew that something had happened between him and this other girl. Minimizing the situation. After denying it, he might have changed his approach and said something like, "It's not a big deal. She's just a friend. You're making a huge deal out of nothing." Again, this isn't about honesty, this is about damage control. He wasn't trying to fix the relationship or ease your pain. He was just trying to cover his tracks. Minimization is another manipulation tactic. If he could make the situation seem smaller than it actually was, maybe you would start questioning yourself. Maybe you would doubt your own feelings and let it go. But again, your gut told you the truth. You saw what you saw. You felt what you felt. Flipping the blame. When denying and minimizing didn't work, he might have flipped the blame onto you. He might have said things like, "Why were you looking at my phone? You don't trust me at all. You're always looking for problems." This is another way to manipulate the situation. Instead of talking about his betrayal, he was now making it about you. He was trying to turn himself into the victim, as if he was the one being wronged, just because you saw something he was trying to hide. In reality, you weren't wrong for seeing the truth. You weren't being paranoid or insecure, you were reacting to actual evidence of infidelity. But instead of taking responsibility, he tried to make you feel like the problem. Your emotional response. At this point, your emotions must have been all over the place. Maybe you felt angry that he was lying right to your face. Maybe you felt sad that someone you loved could betray you so easily. Maybe you felt confused because part of you wanted to believe him, even though you knew better. This kind of emotional manipulation can be extremely exhausting. It forces you to question your own reality, to second-guess what you saw and what you feel. It puts you in a mental battle between your heart and your mind. Your heart wants to believe him, but your mind knows the truth. The beginning of doubt. When trust is broken in a relationship, it's hard to fix, especially when one partner refuses to be honest. If he had admitted the truth, shown remorse, and made an effort to repair the damage, things might have been different. But instead, he was doing everything possible to avoid taking responsibility. At this point, you might have started wondering, if he's lying about this, what else has he lied about? Has he done this before? Will he ever actually tell me the truth? This is how doubt begins to destroy a relationship. Even if you wanted to move forward, even if you wanted to forgive him, how could you ever feel safe and secure with him again? The hardest part, deciding what comes next. Now, you were faced with an impossible choice. Do you break up with him immediately and walk away from a relationship you've invested years in? Do you try to push for the truth, hoping that he will eventually confess? Do you ignore what you saw and try to move on, even though it will always linger in your mind? These are the thoughts that torment someone after being betrayed. No matter what you chose, nothing would ever be the same. At that moment, you weren't just dealing with a cheating boyfriend, you were dealing with the shattering of trust, the rewriting of your love story, and the beginning of an emotional roller coaster that you never asked for. After you confronted him about his cheating and he denied it, things in your relationship didn't just go back to normal. Trust had been broken, and you were left trying to process what had happened. Even though he refused to admit the truth, deep down, you knew what you saw, and you knew what it meant. At this point, most people in a relationship like this face a difficult choice. Do you stay and see if things can be repaired, or do you leave and protect yourself from further pain? For whatever reason, whether it was love, history, or the hope that he would change, you didn't walk away immediately. And as time passed, something strange happened. Instead of distancing himself or continuing to hide his mistakes, he started acting differently. It was almost as if he was trying to prove his love for you. Unannounced visits and sudden attention. One of the first things he did was start showing up at your house unannounced. Before this, maybe he had been distant or inconsistent with how often he made time for you. But suddenly, he seemed determined to be around you as much as possible. At first, this might have seemed like a good sign. Maybe he felt guilty for what he had done and wanted to make things right. Maybe he realized how much he had hurt you and was trying to fix things. But when you looked deeper, it didn't feel entirely genuine. His behavior didn't seem like it was coming from a place of remorse. Instead, it felt forced, almost desperate. It was as if he wasn't trying to rebuild trust but instead was trying to make sure you didn't leave. This is a key difference. A partner who truly regrets their mistakes will focus on your feelings and healing. But a partner who is simply afraid of losing control over you will focus on making sure you don't leave, without actually putting in the work to change. The over-the-top affection. During this time, he may have also showered you with affection in a way that felt different from before. Maybe he was texting you more, calling you randomly, or saying things like, "I love you so much. You mean everything to me. I don't want to lose you. I'll do anything to make this work." Again, on the surface, these might sound like the words of a man who is deeply in love and scared of losing you. But when paired with his lack of accountability, they start to feel less like love and more like manipulation. If he truly wanted to fix things, wouldn't he have admitted what he did? Wouldn't he have sat down with you and had an honest conversation about what happened, why it happened, and how he would rebuild your trust? Instead, he was avoiding the real conversation and hoping that his sudden attention would be enough to make you forget about the betrayal. His focus on sex over emotional healing. One of the most troubling parts of his behavior was that despite everything that had happened, his biggest concern seemed to be having sex with you. After someone has been cheated on, intimacy becomes complicated. You had just gone through an emotional betrayal. You needed time to process, heal, and feel emotionally safe again. But instead of understanding that, he acted as though his needs were more important than your healing. When you told him you weren't ready to be intimate again, his reaction said everything. Instead of being patient, instead of respecting your boundaries, he got upset. He started saying things like, "You don't care about me. I can't just wait forever. Why are you punishing me?" These responses weren't about love. They weren't about making things right. They were about control. A partner who truly cares about your feelings would have said, "I understand. Take your time. I want to rebuild your trust first. Your feelings matter more than my needs." But instead, he made it about himself. He twisted the situation to make you feel guilty for not giving him what he wanted. Instead of being the one apologizing, he made you feel like you were the problem. The 2 times you had sex after the betrayal. Even though you weren't fully comfortable, you ended up sleeping with him twice after finding out about his cheating. And after each time, something felt off. You couldn't shake the feeling that you were being intimate with someone who had been with someone else. His stories didn't fully add up, and deep down, you knew he wasn't being truthful with you. This is a painful reality that many people face after being cheated on. Even when you try to move forward, your body and mind remember the betrayal. Sex is supposed to be an act of love, trust, and connection, but how can you feel truly connected to someone when you no longer trust them? Every time he touched you, there was a small voice in your head reminding you of what he had done. And no matter how much you wanted to ignore it, that feeling wouldn't go away. His actions were about control, not love. Looking back, it becomes clear that his sudden efforts weren't about making things right, they were about making sure he didn't lose you. He started showing up unannounced so that you wouldn't have space to think about leaving. He gave you extra attention not because he was truly remorseful, but because he wanted to make sure you still wanted him. He pushed for sex because he saw physical intimacy as proof that things were back to normal, instead of actually putting in the work to fix the emotional damage he caused. When someone cheats and then refuses to take responsibility, any attempts they make to change are usually superficial. They want to patch things up quickly so they don't have to deal with the consequences. But real change takes time, effort, and accountability. At this point, his actions showed that he wasn't truly sorry, he was just afraid of losing control over you. And deep down, you probably already knew that. As time passed, the situation between you and your boyfriend became even more complicated. Even after you had discovered his cheating, even after he had denied it, even after his attempts to prove his love to you, something still didn't feel right. His behavior wasn't making you feel secure or rebuilding trust, instead, it was making you question yourself. This is one of the most dangerous aspects of toxic relationships: emotional manipulation and gaslighting. When a partner refuses to take responsibility for their actions but still wants to stay in control of the relationship, they use psychological tactics to twist reality and make the victim doubt their own experiences. And unfortunately, this is exactly what your boyfriend was doing to you. Accusing you of not caring. Instead of taking responsibility for breaking your trust, your boyfriend started turning the situation around on you. He began saying things like, "You don't care anymore. You're playing with me. You're treating me like I don't matter." These statements are designed to shift the blame onto you and make you feel guilty. In a healthy relationship, if one partner betrays the other, they should be the one working to rebuild trust. But in this case, instead of focusing on how he hurt you, he started acting as if he was the victim. He was trying to make you feel responsible for his emotions, even though he was the one who had caused the damage in the first place. Instead of acknowledging your pain, he wanted to make his feelings the center of attention. Accusations of cheating. One of the biggest manipulation tactics he used was accusing you of cheating. Despite the fact that he was the one who had been unfaithful, he started accusing you of being with other people. He might have said things like, "You're acting different. Are you seeing someone else? You're just using this as an excuse to mess around with other guys. I know you don't actually care about me anymore." This is a classic projection tactic. When someone is guilty of doing something wrong, they often try to accuse others of the very thing they're guilty of. By making you feel like you were the one being unfaithful, he was trying to distract from his own actions and put you on the defensive. Instead of focusing on what he did wrong, now you were left trying to prove your innocence, even though you had done nothing wrong. Ignoring your pain. When you tried to remind him of what he had done, he refused to take responsibility. You told him, "Don't you remember what you did? You broke my trust. You hurt me." But instead of listening and acknowledging your pain, he dismissed it. He refused to take accountability, and instead of trying to repair the damage, he acted as if you were the one causing problems. At this point, it became clear that he didn't want to have a real conversation about what had happened. Instead of showing remorse or trying to rebuild trust, he was focused on shifting the blame onto you and avoiding the consequences of his actions. How gaslighting works. Gaslighting is a form of emotional abuse where someone manipulates another person into questioning their own reality. And that's exactly what your boyfriend was doing to you. Here's how gaslighting works in relationships. They deny what happened. "I didn't cheat. You're just overthinking things." They make you question your emotions. "Why are you acting like this? You're being dramatic." They flip the blame onto you. "You don't care about me anymore. Maybe you're the one cheating." They make you feel guilty. "You're punishing me for no reason. I don't deserve this." They act like the victim. "I'm the one who's hurting here. Why are you treating me like this?" The goal of gaslighting is to make you doubt yourself and make you feel like you're the one in the wrong. But the truth is, you weren't wrong. You were reacting in a completely natural way to being betrayed. The fact that he refused to acknowledge his actions and tried to make you feel guilty instead was a sign of manipulation. The emotional toll on you. All of this must have been incredibly exhausting for you. Emotional manipulation can make a person feel confused. Am I overreacting? Did I misinterpret what I saw? Guilty. Am I really being unfair to him? Emotionally drained. Why does every conversation feel like a battle? Isolated. No one else understands what I'm going through. Instead of getting the love and support you needed from him after his betrayal, you were instead being treated like you were the problem. At this point, you were probably beginning to feel completely lost. You had spent years in this relationship, but now it felt like you didn't even recognize the person you were with. You wanted to believe that he loved you. You wanted to believe that things could go back to normal. But deep down, you knew things would never be the same again. The big question, are you crazy for giving him another chance? This is the hardest part. After everything that happened, after the lies, the manipulation, the gaslighting, you started wondering. Am I crazy for staying with him? Am I crazy for giving him another chance? The short answer is no. You're not crazy. You're someone who loves deeply. You're someone who wants to believe in the best in people. You're someone who invested years into a relationship and doesn't want to walk away from it overnight. But the real question isn't whether you're crazy. The real question is, does he actually deserve another chance? And based on everything he has shown you so far, the dishonesty, the manipulation, the lack of accountability, it's clear that he hasn't done anything to earn your trust back. People make mistakes. But real love means taking responsibility, making amends, and proving through actions, not just words, that they want to change. Your boyfriend wasn't doing any of that. Instead, he was trying to guilt trip you into staying. At some point, you would have to ask yourself, do I stay and keep hoping he'll change? Or do I choose myself, my happiness, and my peace of mind? Because deep down, you already knew the answer. At this stage, you were caught in an emotional tug-of-war between your heart and your mind. On one side, you had the deep love you felt for him, the memories you had built together, and the years you had invested in this relationship. On the other side, you had the undeniable truth: he had betrayed you, he had manipulated you, and he had refused to take real responsibility. This kind of inner conflict is one of the hardest battles a person can face in a toxic relationship. It's not just about making a logical decision. If relationships were purely logical, you would have walked away the moment you saw those messages on his phone. But love complicates everything. Love makes you hope for change, even when all the evidence tells you otherwise. At this point, you were likely experiencing a mix of emotions. Confusion: why is he acting like the victim when he was the one who cheated? Self-doubt: am I being too harsh? Should I just let this go? Fear: what if I leave and regret it? What if I never find someone else? Hope: maybe he really does love me. Maybe he will change. You weren't just struggling with your feelings for him, you were also struggling with how you saw yourself. If you stayed, would you be weak for allowing someone to treat you this way? If you left, would you be throwing away something that could still be saved? This is the emotional roller coaster that toxic relationships create. The cycle of betrayal, guilt, manipulation, and temporary affection keeps you in a loop, making it nearly impossible to make a clean break. Why walking away feels so hard? For many people in your position, walking away should be the clear choice. But it never feels that simple, does it? There are several reasons why leaving a toxic relationship feels so difficult. 1. The emotional investment. When you've been with someone for years, you don't just walk away from them, you walk away from everything you've built together. The memories, the love, the future plans, it all feels like a waste if you leave. But here's the truth: staying in a broken relationship out of fear of wasted time only leads to more wasted time. 2. The hope that he will change. Even though he had denied, gaslight, and manipulated you, part of you still wanted to believe in him. Maybe he wasn't all bad. Maybe deep down, he loved you. Maybe if you just gave him another chance, he would finally change. But here's the harsh reality: if he truly wanted to change, he would have done it already. Real change doesn't come from fear of losing someone. It comes from genuine self-awareness and remorse. And so far, he had shown neither. 3. The fear of being alone. One of the biggest fears people face in long-term relationships is starting over. You had spent years with this person. You had built a life with him. The idea of suddenly being single, going through the pain of a breakup, and facing an uncertain future was terrifying. But here's what's even scarier: spending more years in a relationship that drains you, manipulates you, and makes you doubt yourself. 4. The manipulation keeping you stuck. By this point, your boyfriend had made it clear. He was going to make you feel guilty for not forgiving him. He was going to accuse you of being the problem. He was going to act like the victim. This was intentional. If he could make you question yourself enough, he knew you would stay. And once you stayed, he wouldn't have to take responsibility for anything. Recognizing the cycle of toxic love. The situation you were in wasn't unique. It was part of a cycle that many people in unhealthy relationships go through. The cycle looks like this: the betrayal: he cheated, lied, and hurt you. The denial and gaslighting: he refused to take responsibility and made you feel like you were overreacting. The love bombing: he showered you with attention and affection to keep you from leaving. The guilt tripping: he flipped the blame, making you feel like you were the problem. The inner conflict: you felt torn between leaving and staying. And then, if you chose to stay, the cycle would eventually repeat itself. This is how toxic relationships keep people trapped. The constant ups and downs create emotional exhaustion, making it harder to see the truth. But the truth is simple. If he truly loved you, he would have never put you in this position in the first place. The moment of clarity: what do you really deserve? At this point, you had to ask yourself a difficult but necessary question. If your best friend was in your position, what advice would you give her? If your best friend told you her boyfriend had cheated on her, lied and denied it, manipulated her into feeling guilty, accused her of things she didn't do. Would you tell her to stay and keep hoping for change? Or would you tell her that she deserved better? Because the truth is, you do deserve better. You deserve a partner who values and respects you, is honest and loyal, never makes you feel crazy for having feelings, takes responsibility for their actions. And from everything you had seen so far, your boyfriend was not that person, making the hardest decision. By now, you were standing at a crossroads. Stay and hope for change, even though he had done nothing to show true remorse. Leave and start over, even though it would be painful and scary. Neither option felt easy. But one of them led to freedom, healing, and self-respect. The other led to more pain, more manipulation, and more wasted years. Deep down, you probably already knew what you needed to do. The real question was, would you choose yourself this time? Because for too long, he had made everything about him. Now, it was time to make a choice that was about you. What comes next? Whether you decided to leave or not, the emotional journey was far from over. You would have to face the pain of separation, the doubts, the healing process, but most importantly, you would have to learn how to trust yourself again. And that would be the hardest and most important lesson of all. Making the decision to leave, if that's the path you chose, was only the first step in a long and painful healing process. The hardest part of leaving a toxic relationship isn't just physically separating from that person, it's emotionally detaching from them. Even after everything he put you through, even after all the lies and manipulation, you probably still felt an overwhelming sense of loss. And that's completely normal. Ending a relationship, no matter how toxic, is like grieving a death. You weren't just losing a person, you were losing the future you once imagined with them, the comfort of familiarity, and the deep emotional connection you had built over the years. At first, it might have felt impossible. The pain was raw, the memories were vivid, and the temptation to go back was stronger than ever. The emotional struggles after leaving. After walking away, you likely experienced a wave of emotions that came in cycles. Sadness, you missed him. Even after everything he did, you still longed for the good times. Guilt, you wondered if you had made the right choice. What if he really did love you? What if you had overreacted? Anger, you felt furious that he put you through so much pain and never took responsibility. Loneliness, you were so used to having him around that being alone felt unbearable. Temptation, there were moments when you wanted to call him, to hear his voice, to go back and pretend none of this had happened. Toxic relationships create an emotional addiction. Even when you know they're bad for you, breaking free from them feels like withdrawal. Your brain had been conditioned to crave him, even though he was the very person who hurt you the most. And this is why so many people go back, because in the short term, going back feels easier than enduring the pain of healing. Why no contact is essential. One of the most important things you could do for yourself after leaving was to establish no contact. No texting. No answering his calls. No checking his social media. No responding to his attempts to win you back. It might have felt harsh, but it was the only way to break the cycle. If he was truly toxic, he would likely try to reach out to pull you back in, not because he genuinely wanted to fix things, but because he didn't want to lose his control over you. No contact wasn't about punishing him. It was about protecting yourself. It was about giving yourself the space you needed to finally see the relationship for what it truly was, without the fog of manipulation clouding your judgment. The power of reflection. During this time, you probably spent a lot of nights overthinking everything. Was it really that bad? Did I make the right choice? What if he really does change this time? These thoughts are normal. But every time they came up, you had to remind yourself of one thing. If he truly loved you, he would have never put you in this position in the first place. Love isn't just words, it's actions. And his actions had proven time and time again that he wasn't willing to be the partner you deserved. Instead of focusing on the good memories, you had to remind yourself of the reality. The betrayal. The denial. The gaslighting. The blame shifting. That was the truth of your relationship. And no amount of wishful thinking could change it. Rebuilding your sense of self. One of the most damaging effects of a toxic relationship is how it shatters your self-worth. After months or even years of manipulation, you start to question. Am I too sensitive? Was I the problem? Am I even worthy of love? Your boyfriend made you feel like you were the issue, but that was never the case. You were not too sensitive, you were reacting in a healthy way to being betrayed. You were not the problem, you were someone who loved deeply and wanted to believe in the best in people. But now, it was time to start believing in yourself. Steps to healing. Allow yourself to grieve. Even though he hurt you, losing a relationship still hurts. Let yourself cry, feel angry, and process the emotions. Journaling your feelings. Writing down your thoughts can help you untangle the emotions and see things clearly. Blocking him on social media. Seeing his posts or checking his activity will only prolong the pain. Out of sight, out of mind. Surrounding yourself with supportive people. Spend time with friends and family who remind you of your worth. Rediscovering yourself. Toxic relationships make you lose yourself. Take time to reconnect with your hobbies, passions, and interests. Therapy or support groups. Talking to a professional can help you process the trauma and regain your self-esteem. The moment you realize you're free. At first, healing felt impossible. But one day, without even realizing it, you would wake up and feel different. You wouldn't miss him as much. You wouldn't feel the urge to text him. You wouldn't feel weighed down by his absence. You would start to feel lighter. More yourself again. And then, you would realize the most powerful truth of all. You didn't lose anything when you left him. He lost you. Looking ahead, what you deserve in love. One day, you would find love again. A love that doesn't make you question your worth. A love that doesn't require you to beg for honesty, loyalty, or respect. A love that feels safe, warm, and secure. And when that love comes, you will look back at this relationship and wonder why you ever settled for anything less. But until then, your journey isn't about finding someone new, it's about finding yourself again. And that is the most beautiful love story of all. By this point, you had gone through the hardest parts, the heartbreak, the confusion, the inner conflict, and the decision to walk away. You had endured the emotional roller coaster of missing him, doubting yourself, and struggling with the pain of detaching from someone you once loved deeply. But now, you were standing on the other side of that storm. For the first time in a long time, you were free. But what happens next? Leaving a toxic relationship isn't just about getting away from that person. It's about rediscovering yourself, rebuilding your confidence, and learning to love yourself in a way that you never did before. Breaking free from the past. Even after walking away, you might have found yourself haunted by memories of the past. Maybe you still had flashbacks of the good times, the sweet moments that made you fall in love in the first place. Maybe you still heard his voice in your head, accusing you of not caring or making you feel guilty. Maybe you struggled with trust issues, fearing that every future relationship would end the same way. Healing doesn't happen overnight. It's a process. But the most important step in that process is making the decision to stop looking back. You don't owe him another chance. You don't owe him closure. You don't owe him your pain. What you do owe is yourself, your happiness, your peace, and your self-respect. Rebuilding your confidence. Being in a toxic relationship can shatter your self-esteem in ways you don't even realize. After months or years of being manipulated, gaslight, and made to feel like you were the problem, it's easy to believe that you're not enough. But that couldn't be further from the truth. This part of your journey is about undoing the damage he caused and reminding yourself of your worth. Ways to rebuild your confidence. Affirmations and self-love. Every day, remind yourself, I am worthy. I am strong. I deserve real love. Say these words until you believe them. Setting boundaries in future relationships. Your past relationship taught you what you will never tolerate again. If someone disrespects you, walk away without guilt. Focusing on self-growth. Instead of dwelling on the past, shift your energy into improving yourself. Take up a new hobby, start working out, learn something new, do things for you. Dressing up and feeling good about yourself. Sometimes, feeling confident starts with the little things, wearing clothes that make you feel beautiful, taking care of yourself, and embracing your own unique style. Surrounding yourself with positivity. Let go of people who drain your energy. Spend time with those who uplift and support you. Learning to trust again. One of the hardest things after leaving a toxic relationship is learning to trust again. You might find yourself questioning the intentions of new people. You might feel afraid of opening up and being vulnerable again. You might wonder if all relationships will eventually turn into the same painful cycle. It's okay to be cautious, but don't let your past relationships steal your future happiness. How to move forward without fear. Take your time, you don't need to rush into another relationship. Healing comes first. Recognize red flags early. If someone reminds you of your ex's toxic behaviors, listen to your intuition. Believe that good love exists, not everyone is like your ex. There are kind, loving, and emotionally mature people out there. Most importantly, be kind to yourself. You are still healing, and that's okay. The power of choosing yourself. For so long, your relationship revolved around his needs, his feelings, and his expectations. You were made to feel guilty for setting boundaries, for expressing your emotions, and for prioritizing yourself. But now, you are in control. You no longer have to walk on eggshells. You no longer have to beg for respect. You no longer have to feel like you're not enough. Because you are enough. Walking away wasn't a sign of weakness, it was a sign of strength. Choosing yourself wasn't selfish, it was necessary. This wasn't just a breakup. This was a rebirth. Looking toward the future. Someday, you will wake up and realize that you no longer think about him. His words will no longer hold power over you. His absence will no longer feel like a loss. His memory will no longer carry pain. Instead, you will feel peace. You will look in the mirror and see someone who survived. Someone who grew. Someone who became stronger than she ever thought possible. And when you do find love again, it will be the kind of love you always deserved. A love built on trust, respect, and mutual effort. A love that doesn't require you to beg for basic decency. A love that makes you feel safe, cherished, and valued. But until then, your focus isn't on finding someone else. Your focus is on loving yourself. Because once you truly love yourself, you'll never settle for anything less than what you deserve again. And that is the most powerful lesson of all. Final thought, you are not alone. If you ever feel weak, if you ever doubt your decision, if you ever wonder if you'll heal, remember this. You are not alone. Millions of people have walked this path before you, and they have come out stronger, wiser, and happier. And so will you. One day, you'll look back and realize that leaving was the best decision you ever made. And when that day comes, you will finally be free. Blue Heart.